welcome everybody again. Just two remarks at the beginning. The first one, there is a request. You will get it by email. I am going to ask you to prepare a very short paper by Easter, touching those subjects I put here on the screen, circulating around issues that are important in the world nowadays. But really short paper, 2 up to 3 pages, and this very request will be sent by email to you. You don't need to take a note. But you have plenty of time. Coming months, I will bring again 2 people, a journalist from Guardian. She will be talking about the new tendencies in the current journalism. Then somebody will be talking about the new economy at startups again, and then somebody will be talking about human and social capital and innovation. And as I said, 2 up to 3 pages sent to me. And today the topic for this meeting is climate change. We have guest Professor Zbigniew Kundzewicz, corresponding member of the Polish Academy of Science, member of the Academia Europea, connected with really many scientific institutions worldwide, mainly in Poland, Germany and China. Senior scientist in the famous Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, called PIC. Editor-in-chief of scientific bi-monthly Hydrological Science Journal in the UK, and member of additional boards of several scientific journals. Author of almost 400 publications. And what is important, coordinating lead author of many chapters of Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is an institution. Professor is a member of this institution, and this is an institution which got in the year 2007 the Nobel Peace Prize for this very report regarding climate change. Professor, really appreciate you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, if I may say so. Dr. Kundzewicz was a mayor of a long-term mayor of a large city of Prof in Poland. So it is my honor to be announced by yourself. And thank you for inviting me here. Climate change and its impacts, observations and projections. This is the topic of my talk. I don't know whether it is an important topic in your country. In Poland it is, and in much of Europe it is. Yet it's a matter of controversy. So people disagree on different things, and I will do my best trying to deliver a hopefully coherent message. I structured my talk around the following seven items. Some of them are, don't be afraid, are very short, like 1 or 2 or a few slides. So I would like to explain climate system and mechanism of climate change, and then talk about observations of temperature and precipitation and observations of impact. Next come projections for the future of temperature, precipitation and impacts. Finally, concluding remarks. So in introduction, I would start from a following statement. Climate is an averaged state of weather. So if we think of the 22nd of February in 5 years, 2025, what we expect is climate. What we get will be weather. So now we cannot make a forecast. A forecast for 5 years doesn't make sense. So we can say that according to the climate, the day should look so and so. By the way, probably today is not a typical day. So the climate does not, well, it is rather very rare occasion that it's such a sunny and warm day on the 22nd of February in a continental climate of Kiev. The temperature at every spatial scale, global, continental, regional, national, and local, is increasing, has been increasing. So we have a warming. And outside the when you look through the window, today you see an illustration of warming. Of course, it may happen that on the 22nd of February you have a half a meter of snow and -10. This can also happen. But the weather outside is more related to the message of my talk. The climate is warming. It has warmed already by 1 degree, more than 1 degree, since the pre-industrial period, since 1860. And in the last 5 years, it's 0.2, which is very much. 0.2 in 5 years means 0.4 degrees in 10 years, in a decade. So it's a very strong warming. And recent sea level rise amounts to 5 millimeters per year, which is again more than before. And this is serious. Maybe not so much in this place, because you are far away from the sea. So a sea level rise is not so dangerous for you. But for Poland, it is dangerous. And also for southern Ukraine. So for your Black Sea coast, it's also, it could be a problem. So sea level rise results from 2 mechanisms. One is that warm water takes more space. So warming means sea level rise by definition. And in addition, you have melting glaciers and melting Greenland and Antarctica. So the whole continent's under ice. I will draw a lot of information from IPCC. I give you the address here. It's an intergovernmental panel on climate change. That, in my view, is the main and most authoritative source of knowledge. And I have been collaborating with them for 25 years now. So that's why I give it here with the address. You may wish to find a lot of information if you find it interesting. It is open, so open access. And one example, climate change in water. This is a special paper. I was one of the co-editors of this paper, and it was has been published in 6 UN languages. So first the English version, but then French, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, and Chinese. This is an example of the Russian first page, and my name in Cyrillic alphabet. Climate change and mechanism of climate change. Well, greenhouse effect is essential. It's essential for our life. Without the greenhouse effect, there will be no life on Earth. Because sun is far away. So the sun warms the Earth up to -18 degrees. -18, very cold. Only thanks to a greenhouse effect, we have a pleasant +15 as global average temperature. So we get 33 degrees thanks to a greenhouse effect. The understanding of greenhouse effect, I think, is it's immediate from this cartoon. So greenhouse, where you produce vegetables or flowers with a glass roof and glass walls. So the sun emits ultraviolet short wave length radiation that penetrates through glass. But the long wave radiation emitted by the Earth cannot escape into the space. It stays in a greenhouse. And that's why we can produce tomatoes or roses in in March. The role of a glass roof is played by the atmosphere that contains greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide. There is something wrong with my microphone, or?
No.
Maybe two microphones are on. Okay, thank you. Some 20,000 years ago, most of Europe was covered with ice, a lot of ice. In some places, 3 kilometers of ice. And this means that the water that now is in the oceans. So nowadays we have a lot of water in the oceans. And 20,000 years ago, a lot of water was in the form of ice. So sea level was much lower, 120 meters below present. But what we observe right now is the other extreme, namely these masses of ice are melting, and these masses of water go into the sea and the ocean. Sorry for a very busy table. This is busy, and I'm well aware that you cannot read because the font is not high. It's not big enough, but it's a list of radiative forcing, explaining why the climate has changed. So the most important factor that is responsible for the warming is the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. The humankind is burning coal, gas, and oil, and wood, and carbon dioxide goes to the atmosphere and accumulates there. So this is the most important factor. Methane is also important. Methane produced by ruminants, animals, cows, and when planting rice. And also nitrous oxide is important here. Sometimes, so the bars to the right from zero respond to warming, but also there are some compensation effects related to aerosols. So aerosols cause a little cooling, but in fact our uncertainty is very high. So you see cloud adjustments due to aerosols. Sorry, the science says we don't know. It is a negative radiative forcing, but we don't know how strong. So there is a lot of uncertainty, yet including uncertainty, we are certain that the radiative forcing has increased, mainly because of emission of greenhouse gases. And this is the result of the emissions. Very clear, growing, increasing signal. Concentration of carbon dioxide in Mauna Loa, in Hawaii, in the United States. Long time series. They started observations in 1951 and go on and on until today. So you see little oscillations that are corresponding to a vegetation cycle. So the plants absorb carbon dioxide when the leaves are green, growing, and when they are green. And in the winter, this carbon dioxide goes back to the air because leaves fell and they are rotten. So it's a very regular, first of all, very regular gradual trend, and second, annual oscillations corresponding to vegetation in the northern hemisphere, because there are more lands in the northern hemisphere. Global temperature growing. So please have a careful look, because some people say, "Hey, is it really growing?" Well, how can you call this tendency growing? You cannot call it otherwise. So out of the top 20 hottest years, 19 happened after the year 2001. All years of the century were in the top 20 hottest years. Plus 1998. 1998 was also hot. This was unusually hot year. So 2014 was the hottest year ever observed, but 2015 was even hotter. 2016 was even hotter than 2015. 17 and 18 not so much, but then 2019 was again very hot, and it was second hottest ever observed. IPCC issues special reports every couple of years, and I listed the most important attribution sentence. So in the first assessment report, the statement was, there is little evidence of anthropogenic influence on climate. Next, discernible human evidence. And then, stronger and stronger. Subjective probability that most of the observed warming over the last 50 years is likely to have been due to increase in greenhouse gas concentrations was assessed as 66%, so 2 in 3. This was the subjective probability in the year 2001. And now getting stronger and stronger. Very likely, which is 90%, and extremely likely, 95%. So we are nearly sure. There is no other way to explain the warming. This is a young Polish lady who worked with me, and we published a joint paper. She was the first author. I like this diagram because it shows that our model could reconstruct the global temperature based on different climate factors. So we fitted the model up to the year 2000 and then tried to reconstruct the future. It was so-called hindcasting. So it was the forecasting of the past. And in our model, we ignored CO2. So our model was very good. We could fit anything. But it had no predictive power. Without CO2, you cannot make a forecast. CO2 plays an important role. Important is, of course, solar activity. Solar activity is periodic. They are 11-year cycles. And now we are at the low level of solar activity. So people say, well, sun decides on the climate. To some extent, yes, sun is our engine. It gives us radiation. But you see, sun is weak now, and yet we have hot days. So greenhouse effect is very strong now. Even if sun is weak, greenhouse effect is very strong. But it's not the end yet. Except for climate change and global warming, we have climate variability. This map shows you the situation during a warm episode of ENSO. ENSO stands for El Niño Southern Oscillations. So every couple of years, you have a strong El Niño when very warm water reaches to the Peruvian coast of the Pacific Ocean. And if such a situation arises, there are different, well, it's a likelihood of wet weather in some places and dry weather in another place. It's not a deterministic link, but it's a highly strong statistical link. So there is a likelihood or probability that if there is a strong El Niño, then there is a drought in Indonesia and in Australia, and there is a wet period and floods in Western United States. In Europe, as you see, El Niño does not play a big role because we are far away from the south. This is the area of, this is the theater where El Niño, Southern Oscillations, is an important phenomenon. So South America, Australia, Asia, and Africa. Observations of temperature and precipitation change. Last summer was very hot in Poland, probably also here. I give an example from the city of Wrocław, showing you the days when the maximum temperature exceeded 30 degrees. So there were 34 such days in Wrocław. In June, 14 such days, one day 37, one day 38. But Poznań, my town, was even more extreme because on the 26th of June we had 38 degrees. So first of all, very hot individual days, and second, there is a run of 7 consecutive hot days in August up to the 1st of September, and also in July. Hot summer, hotter than ever. This is absolute records, what happened in June. So this is just illustration that indeed the climate is getting warmer. Well, I cannot see the page quite well because it's rather light. This is my old paper entitled "Warmer, Still Warmer." But such a title is not sexy. This is sexy, you see? New ice age. Cooling is coming. The year 2003, 56,000 additional deaths caused by heat waves in Poland, in Europe, and yet in Poland we have a cover story. New ice age, 2003, hottest year, hottest summer. And scientists warn against a big cooling. And here, report, it will be colder, 2008. Why? Because it was indeed a cold February. So the author looked at February 2008, which was colder than February 2007. 2 points, and he said it's really colder now. So time for recover. Bono, you know Bono, a frontman of U2, yeah? So globalne ogłupienie means global fooling. Bono is an activist, very strongly engaged in climate policy. So Bono is emitting water vapor from his earth. They are Polish cover stories that attract attention. So fake news everywhere. Yet people buy it because they like this sort of narratives. And this is the truth. 20th century changes in temperature. Warming everywhere, except a little piece of the ocean south of Greenland. I will show later one slide that illustrates this. But otherwise, it's a very monotonous map. Actually very boring because it is so red. Warming everywhere. This is the message. Observed. Another illustration from the IPCC report. Possibly the 30 years before the last report were the warmest period over the last 1,400 years. So likely, which means, well, there is a whole uncertainty language developed for IPCC. And the word likely means 66%, at least, 66 plus, or 2 in 3. Sorry. Decades are, the last 4 decades show a clear trend. And the new decade, the years from 2011 to 2020, for sure, will be even higher. It will be here. This decade is not over yet. The year 2020 only started. Yet, I can guarantee that you have a continuation of this trend. We try to reconstruct the past, going back to the Middle Ages. And yes, there were some warmer and colder times, but what we have now globally is warmer than than otherwise in the last millennium. Spring cover over the northern hemisphere is going down, sea ice extent going down, ocean heat content going up, which means that oceans accommodate a lot of heat. The Earth, the atmosphere heats up, the land heats up, but most of it stays in the oceans. And the global sea level going up as well. There are more warm days and warm nights. Well, they are nights and they are days. And there are less cold nights and cold days. It's a clear signal throughout the globe. Observed changes in daily precipitation intensity. In much of Europe and Ukraine, they are increasingly heavy rains. So if it rains, it is likely to be heavy. So you may have heavy rains and floods, more frequently than before. It's not everywhere like that, but at least in your country, this is a clear signal, and in my country as well. When you have brownish colors, it's the other way around. So precipitation becomes less intense. And I think it's a very clear explanation why the precipitation intensity has grown. Simply because there is more room for water vapor in the warmer atmosphere. So warmer atmosphere can hold more vapor, and this creates a potential for more intense, more heavy precipitation. Now, observations of impacts in regions and sectors systems. Changes in cryosphere. This is a Muir Glacier in Alaska, an old photograph made in 1880s by the United States Geological Survey. And the same place 125 years later, or no ice, no glacier, just water, ocean. Pasterze Glacier in Austria. Very large glacier that reached nearly to the chapel in the year 1930. How about now? Chapel is there, but glacier has disappeared. It's far away. So in Switzerland, there is an Aletsch Glacier, which is nearly 1,000 meters deep, but it is getting smaller and smaller every year. So glaciers go. They melt everywhere, in Himalayas, in the Alps. In Ukraine and in Poland, we do not have glaciers, but where they are glaciers, they go. Greenland ice melts at a rate of 150 to 250 cubic kilometers per year. So Greenland is not covered by ice anymore. I mean, much of it is, but there is already a lot of land without ice, and they are examples of fire. So there is some primitive vegetation that can burn. Example, Greenland record last year, 23 degrees. So you can imagine that if there is a 23 degrees, ice must melt very fast, and it does. Leave Greenland for a moment, go to Antarctica. Last year, I think there were 2 cases reported in the media of a large iceberg that, well, there is a term calving, like calf or a young cow being born. So a young calf is being born here, and it leaves the mother. A huge piece of ice goes to the ocean. It's really huge, 30 kilometers by 60 kilometers. So maybe this is like Kiev, I think. Such a piece of ice went off the Amery ice shelf in Antarctica, and it contributes when this melts completely in a warmer ice water, there will be a sea level rise everywhere. Another problem with melting cryosphere is very common in Russia, in Siberia. So in many towns there, buildings are suffering because of they were built on a permafrost. If permafrost melts, buildings break. 80% of buildings in Vorkuta are like that. Real problem, because people cannot live, it's unsafe, yeah? They were built safety. They were built on permafrost, but now permafrost is disappearing. It's weaker and weaker, melting. The same holds for Ledniki, so for river roads. So it was a typical Siberian highway is a river. Frozen river is a Siberian highway. But if a river is not frozen, then you have no road in winter. Big problem. Sports. Actually, last year, or the present winter, it was not only lack of snow. There are many competitions were either cancelled or postponed or shortened because of a strong wind. But often it is lack of snow. So if you work very, very hard, you can bring snow from higher mountains, or you can produce snow, but you see outside the jumping place there is no snow. So warming climate means big problems for skiing, including ski jumping. So, summarizing, in a warmer world, the energy demand for heating in winter decreases. But summers are hot and people want to use air conditioning. So cooling is very energy consumptive. So what we gain in winter, we lose in summer, willing to have a pleasant temperature. And warmer winters, it's a good news for road traffic. If there's no snow and no ice jam, this is fine. Road traffic and road maintenance. But it's a very bad news for winter sports, tourism and recreation. Water resources. This is actually one of my favorite topics. There are three categories of problems. Too little water, too much, or too dirty. And all three can be exacerbated by climate change, by global warming. I made this photograph in Bolivia. It is a dying glacier. It used to be a glacier producing a lot of water for La Paz, for a large capital city of Bolivia. But this glacier is nearly dead. There is some ice still, but mostly it is small stones, cobbles. And this photograph illustrates a positive feedback. Ice has a high albedo, which means that sunlight is reflected to a large extent. When ice goes, when snow goes, the ground is brownish or blackish, so albedo is very low, and the sunlight is absorbed and warms up the surface. So it makes the land warmer. Nepal, Lhasa, Tibet and Nepal. Lhasa, capital city of the Tibet or Chinese province. It's a water tower of many big rivers. And Himalayan glaciers are also retreating, which means that in a remote future, people will have to build reservoirs in order to store water. Water can be stored for free if glaciers are there. But if glaciers are not there, then reservoirs will be needed. Big problem. In much of the developing world, water quality is very poor. And actually, if it is getting warmer, situation is even worse. Because a hot period often comes during a drought, and there is no water to dilute effluents, to dilute sewage. So water sewage becomes a nuisance and accelerated eutrophication with toxic algae blooms. In a third assessment report of IPCC, I was a coordinating lead author of the water chapter. And we produced such a map where colors show you the availability of water. So it's a water stress indicator, withdrawal to availability ratio. Blue color means no stress. No stress in Sahara because nobody is living there. But if people live there, then it will be a problem. Stress means brown, very high stress, this is a color. And in the boxes, we gave examples of water-related problems. Some of them are not directly related to climate, or maybe not only to climate. For instance, Aral Sea is a dead sea, in fact. So it shrinked because of a human overexploitation. People take water out of Murdaria and Amudarya and grow cotton in the desert. Cotton requires a lot of water. So I would say cotton drinks Aral Sea. And Aral Sea becomes a hypersaline, and there is no life there already. And people suffer. I mean, their health suffer, and they lost jobs because they cannot go fishing. I don't have a photograph, but they are very famous photographs of ships and boats in the desert. Once upon a time it was a lake, it was an Aral Sea, now it's a desert, salty desert. In a Yellow River, or Huanghe, sometimes the river does not carry any water to the sea. It dries up. It dries up because of a climate variability, but also because of a huge withdrawal of water for irrigation, for agricultural irrigation. In 1990, no, just a moment. I'm sorry for that. It's very close between the buttons. Yeah. In 1998, 70% of Bangladesh was underwater. Huge flood. And then perhaps it's important that drinking water in India was contaminated by arsenic and fluoride. So they are world famous water problems superimposed on the water availability map. Projections for the future. We have mathematical models, and we can project climate and water in the next decades to come. You may know Nature Journal. It's a weekly journal. It's a top journal globally. They are really very serious. So they do not promote something that is not serious for a cover. And here you have a cover story, the coming climate crunch. So there is a 1 trillion ton of carbon dioxide still hanging above the Earth, but it's hanging on a very very thin thread, like a hair. If if a trillion ton is really emitted, then the probability that the warming exceeds 1.5 degrees is very high. So we can, and now we have already emitted half of it, 500 billion tons. So serious. Now IPCC again, fifth assessment report. It is a little bit oldish to 2013, but we are working on the next sixth assessment report. It's going to be published in the year 20 and 21, next year. So it's a little bit oldish, but the future still looks like these maps, which means warming everywhere. But warming depends on the scenario of emissions. So there is a chance, if people try hard, to limit the warming to this level. But continuation of the business as usual would lead to very strong warming, especially near to the poles, the Arctic and the Antarctic. And this is dangerous because there is a lot of ice there. If warming is strong there, then this ice melts. Precipitation, one could explain, first of all, slight warming or this very beneficial, very benign scenario is not so dramatic. But business as usual means a lot of drying around the Mediterranean belt. So to the south and to the north from the Mediterranean, it's going to be hotter and drier. Very bad, because water is very precious there. We made a study in a Polish-Norwegian project that I coordinated about climate projections. They are not valid for Austria, but should anyone be interested, they are available in free access in a special Earth System Science data. But I will tell you the summary for one scenario. Business as usual means a huge warming in Poland and very high in spring, which means that after a warm winter comes heat, comes summer. Spring is very short because temperature goes very high here. But of course, it's not decided. Perhaps humankind would go this way. Perhaps the new Green Deal proclaimed by Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen will lead to a reduction of a warming rate. This is our hope. Projections of climate change impacts. For many years now, in several reports of IPCC, there is a nice illustration of reasons for concern. We call it a burning amber, which means that higher, the color is more intense and the temperature is higher. If the amber burns, then the black or a very dark red color comes very high. And the reasons for concern are lumped in 5 categories. One is unique and threatened system. This means coral reefs. Corals are bleaching and corals are dying already. And they are going to be more seriously affected with a small warming. On the y-axis you have the warming. So now we are here, 1 degree warming, but it goes up. So corals will die. And the Arctic fauna and flora are also endangered, in jeopardy. Then extreme weather events, which means that extremes of the past are likely to become a new norm. And future extreme will be much more extreme than the past extremes. Distribution of impacts, very uneven and unfortunate. What it means, uneven. Africa will suffer a lot. And Africa was not guilty. Africa did not contribute to emission of greenhouse gases. This was a thing of, this was a result of industrial revolution. So first England, then America, much of Europe. So Africa did not contribute, but it will suffer. Global aggregate impacts can be also very high. So if you sum up the economic costs, likely to be high. And then at the end, large-scale singular events. What does this mean? If all of Greenland melts, it's a singular event, because this means increase of sea level by 6 to 7 meters, Greenland. And if Antarctica melts, then this would mean perhaps between 50 and 60 meters of sea level rise. So this is a large-scale singular event because it can go only one way. If it melts, it cannot freeze again. It will not freeze again. It's lost. And we have a terrible sea level rise. So I'm looking forward to the new product. I'm not involved with this, with production of this figure, but the next IPCC report will show you probably the same idea, reasons for concern, but now we are closer to real problems because the warming is increasing. West Nile virus. This is a special report of an inter-academy panel of European Union, and I'm a member there. So Ukraine is safe, Poland is safe, but West Nile virus will intensify in the south of Europe. Actually, I should not say that Ukraine is safe, because southern part of Ukraine may be also affected. Ukraine is not considered here because this was produced for European Union only. So I'm very sorry that some of my maps do not show Ukraine, or they show Ukraine, but they do not show results. The same holds for ragweed pollen. A lot of ragweed pollen that is very allergy. Well, there are bad times for people who are sensitive to allergens, especially in Romania, and probably if you extend this also in Ukraine. Problems related to a lot of pollens in the air and increasing allergy in all those people who are sensitive. This is a different religion, but it's a holy place of Muslims. Mount Arafat near Mecca, millions people go there every year. Temperature is 40 degrees. Some people die, but if the temperature is 45 degrees, which comes soon, many more will die. I don't know, maybe they do something about it. Well, they have in Gulf countries, they have skiing, indoor skiing, yeah? So, but it's very, very, very tough problem. So this was promoted to a cover story in a science magazine, that global warming means a lot of heat in Mecca. So pilgrims will suffer, many of whom are old. So they will go there in a pilgrimage, and this will be their last travel. Projected water-related hotspots in boxes show that, well, I think this is interesting. Flooded area for annual peak discharge in Bangladesh increases at least by 25% with a global temperature increase of 2 degrees. So 2 degrees of warming translates into 25% increase of a flooded area. Small islands in the Indian Ocean, like Maldives, will will suffer the problems with the thickness of freshwater lenses. Normally, under an island, there is a freshwater lens, and people drink water from this freshwater lens. But the thickness of freshwater lens goes down with the warming and with the sea level rise. It's a kind of an amplifier effect. Only 10 centimeters of sea level rise means that the thickness of freshwater lens goes down from 25 to 10 meters. So well, 3 weeks ago, I was talking to a gentleman from the Maldives, and it is a country that suffers a lot of, well, first of all, sea level rise means that the country may be underwater soon, much of it. And then they suffer lack of fresh water. So massive desalination. They have to produce water from the sea. But for that you need energy. They don't have freshwater lenses anymore. In Europe, it was not so easy to find a very striking example, but what we found was electricity production in hydropower stations in Spain likely to decrease by 25% because there is less rain and whatever falls evaporates. So poor message, bad news for hydropower. I'm quite proud to be a co-author of this paper published in Science magazine. Stationarity is dead. So we are living in a non-stationary, unstable world. And this paper attracted more than 2,000 citations according to Web of Science. This is our principal story. The areas that are wet will become wetter, and the areas that are dry will become drier. Good story for Siberia, good story for Canada, Alaska. Bad news for Mediterranean belt. Bad news for California and Mexico. Poland lies in between. So the north of Europe becomes wetter. South of Europe becomes drier. I'm afraid that Ukraine looks drier on this map. And Poland is exactly in between, so the signal is not that strong. I mentioned there will be a lot of discussion about that. You may ask questions, sure.
In the map before you showed, Russia is blue, it doesn't mean it's underwater?
No, sorry. Probably I was not clear enough. Blue color means wetter, more humid, not underwater. You would need a lot of water to cover Siberia. Yeah? This is a huge area. So red means less water, blue means more water. You see, blue color, plus 5%, plus 10%, 20%, 40%. And red or brown, or starting from yellow, means minus 5, minus 10, minus 20, minus 40. So no. Underwater means, yeah, actually the other, one of my slides here was illustrating what happens with sea level rise. And this was really countries, small island stays underwater. But this map shows only direction of change, whether a country gets drier or wetter. And actually it is very strong signal here because around the Mediterranean you have only dry colors. And in the Siberia it is wet already and it's going to be wetter in a warmer future. So more mosquitoes, more floods, and unfortunately in winter less ledniki, less roads. Bangladesh will be underwater very soon. You see, 1 meter would make the country much smaller. This is Dhaka, the capital city. If the sea level rise is 5 meters, then Dhaka will be a port. It will be a seaport. Bangladesh is very densely populated, 160 million people, and very high population growth. So it's a sensitive country for sea level rise. And I mentioned already on one map that during the 1998 flood, more than 2/3, 70% of Bangladesh was underwater. This was virtually underwater, but not Russia. And now it will be underwater for forever. Well, never say forever, but for a long time, for thousands of years. Unless people try to mitigate the climate change. So there is a chance, but not very high one. Poland. For the time being, we have more problem with lack of water, but if the sea level rise continues, if the sea level rise is equal to 4 meters, then our iconic Hel Peninsula would become an island, unless we try to defend it. And Zhuave region, which is located in depression, will be underwater. If the sea level rise goes higher, like 60 meters, which means that most of Antarctica melts and the whole Greenland melts, then it's a very bad story for Northern Europe and Germany and Poland. Ukraine is safe. You are far away. But from the Black Sea, you will have problems. From the Black Sea, yeah? So 60 meters is a big problem also for you from the south. Of course, one can dream of some engineering measures. For instance, recently there was a news in the media that one can try to build a seawall, but it's not easy because these seawalls would start from Scotland and go to Norway, but sea is 300 meters deep near to Norway, so you have to build 300 meters already now, plus 20 or 30 or 50 meters, depending what you want to save. 60 meters means great movements of people. People who could not live in the places where they live now. But it's a very remote future. That's for good. It's not for you, not for your children, not for your grandchildren. It's for many hundred years, if not millennia. But this is faster. 4 meters is faster. Moreover, from time to time, we have a storm. So even if sea level rise is not very high, yet the storm brings water at the Hel Peninsula, and it may create a problem in a couple of decades already. I mentioned a piece of ocean south from Greenland. So this is related with a Green Ocean Conveyor Belt, or Gulf Stream. Thanks to this conveyor belt, and thanks to the fact that warm water travels to Northern Sea, it warms our continent. So Poland is warm, Ukraine is warm, thanks to Gulf Stream. And now, south from Greenland, we see that strange things are happening. It's a local cooling of the sea, which means that this conveyor of heat changes is functioning. So thanks to conveyor of heat, we have pleasant temperatures in Norway. Norway is very far north, like Canada. And Canada is very cold, whereas Norway is warm because of this system of currents, ocean currents, that are getting weaker in a warming world. For several reasons. One of the reasons is increasing influx of fresh water to the Northern Sea. The film, Hollywood blockbuster, The Day After Tomorrow, was not really science, yet it showed that climate is very sensitive and that it can be extreme, like here, much of America under a new glaciation. So it is not reality, and it doesn't go this way, it goes in the other direction. Yet the film was very important because it illustrated that climate is really something that matters to all of us. I'm here close to the end of my talk, and I refer to an interview that I gave to a journalist in Geneva, where I worked for IPCC as well. It was 2001, and I talked to her for a long time, and then she gave a title, Warm Up Could Create Environmental Refugees. I was not very happy with the title. Yeah, I said, it could create environmental refugees, but to me it was not the first priority. For her, it was first priority, and she was right, because this is what matters now very much. That some refugees may be leaving their places because the conditions worsen so much that they cannot grow food, they do not have water, and they have to leave. They have to come to a place where living conditions are better. And last slide, short concluding remarks. Consolidated evidence reinforces human influence that as a dominant cause of the climate change. So climate has always changed. There are natural reasons for change. But what we see now is a human impact, so anthropogenic effect. Climate impacts are hitting already harder and sooner than climate assessments indicated even a decade ago. Projections illustrate further and stronger adverse changes. I have a large experience with IPCC, and I noticed that in the past, people were very cautious. They try not to be alarmistic. And that's why projections were they were not strong enough. People were afraid that uncertainty was high. So it would be non-scientific to make a statement if uncertainty is high. But now the evidence is stronger and stronger. And growing climate impacts increase the risk of crossing critical tipping points, like complete melt of Greenland. At the end, Dr. Kundzewicz mentioned that I was a member of a collective Nobel Peace Prize, so this comes. This is a diploma with an abstract painting. Thank you for attention, and I'm ready to intervene with you if you want. Well, first of all, now I can answer to your questions, but later on I'm also available. Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you for this presentation. I have a question regarding the perception of Polish people to this topic. So, like, how it is in society? Do people pay attention to this topic? And maybe you have some initiatives in Poland or something like civil initiatives of people who want to solve this problem or to try to do their best for solving this problem in Poland.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very real problem because Poland sits on coal. Ukraine also sits on coal. So you are using coal to produce electricity. For Poland, coal is the most essential raw material. And increasingly people consider that climate is important and that it is anthropogenic warming. So I think that the percentage of Polish nation that tries to support climate policy has been increasing. And as you mentioned in your question, indeed NGOs, civil society groups are playing a very important role there. However, the government is forced to play a role. Now we have a Ministry of Climate, and it's necessary in the European Union to reduce emissions. And Poland, even if some people don't like it, Poland will have to follow this way. There is no other way. This is a policy of European Union, whose member Poland is.
I have several questions. So first of all, I'm of course interested in consequences to Ukraine, in consequences of global warming to Ukraine. So first one is, how would it influence the Crimea? Would it like be underwater or not? And the nearest territories like Odessa Oblast, which is near the Black Sea. So how would it influence? And then one of your maps showed us that Ukraine in general would become more warm country than it is. Does it mean that, for example, we could have like 4 harvests per year and we could benefit a lot from agrarian system? Or if there is a chance for us in this way?
So I think there are some good news and bad news. Indeed, I'm very sorry that several of my maps do not include Ukraine, because it is a report of EU studies and they don't go beyond the EU. I'm very sorry for that. So I was guessing that probably you will have problems with allergens as well. Increasing problem with allergens because your neighbor countries who are members of the European Union are having increasing problem. So the news about the warming is, I give you my hat, this is 100%. Warmer Ukraine, warmer Poland, warmer Ukraine. And sea level rise is a natural consequence of warming. So when I said that you will not have problems with sea level rise, I mentioned Kiev, and it's far away from the sea. But you have a large coast, and also the province that you mentioned and Crimea itself will suffer during any sea level rise. And at present, sea level rise is 5 millimeters per year, which means 10 centimeters in 20 years, 10 centimeters. But this is now, and it is accelerating. So until the end of the century, depends, they are different assessments because people can do something, and many try. Well, European Union really tries seriously to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to reduce the warming. But if all these efforts are not effective, then 1 meter, and some people say that even up to 2 meters, sea level rise is possible in this century, which is important for all sandy beaches. Sandy beaches are very low in Poland and in Ukraine. Problem. Fortunately, it's not decided. Well, it is for us, of course, we don't want to lose beaches, but if the climate is warming, then we will lose beaches, unless you build a huge seawalls. But if you build the seawalls, it is so ugly. I mean, maybe you've been to the Netherlands. Their beach, well, the capital city, Den Haag, has a very nice kurort Scheveningen. So there is a beach behind a dike, huge dike, like 10 meters. It's really ugly. I mean, it's a beach, it's a sand, it's a sea, but this is not as pretty as beaches in Poland or in Ukraine. So potentially it's a problem for you. And also on one of the map, I mentioned that probably you may get some drying as well. So warming for sure, and probably drying, at least in part. Of course, your rivers are very long, so Dnipro starts far upstream from here. But you need a lot of water in the whole country. And also you need a lot of water for, well, it's a huge population and a lot of irrigated agriculture. So I would say, for sure, per saldo, Ukraine will not be a winner. I'm afraid it will be rather a loser of climate change. And the worse it goes, the more you go to the south, the worse it's likely to be. So maybe the North Ukraine will be the winner and South will be the loser. Mesdames? No? Yeah.
I just think it was very exciting lecture. But my question is really, what would you advise us to do about it? Because you convinced me that it will happen, that this is a process which will gradually be there. You know, could we stop it? And if we could, what should we do?
Well, many thanks for your kind words. It's so pleasing to listen that I convinced you. So I'm really more than happy for having convinced you. But the problem is real and the problem is serious. So European Union gives a very good example to the world. But will the world follow? This is not sure. European Union itself will not save the world. Because EU is responsible for 10% of global emissions. Yeah? The main emitter is China. Second biggest is USA. China is doing really a lot. I'm working with them. But, well, the news that I saw yesterday, I think, was that because of the crisis with the coronavirus, there is a 6% decrease of carbon dioxide emissions in China because there is less production. So it's a good news, even if...
Except...
Yeah, so Chinese people are crying, yeah? Because this is not good news for them. It's good news for... But in general, so the way is very clear. All the decision makers of the world went to Paris in December 2015. And they said, we have to do something. We have to decrease concentration of carbon dioxide. We have to reduce the emissions. And it would be great to reduce the emissions in such a way that the warming is capped below 2 degrees or below 1.5 degrees. 1.5 is a dream. This is our... But presidents and prime ministers went home and then calculated. Their scientists calculated what they could do. And the result is that they were ready to do something at home in order to reduce the warming to 3.2 degrees. So it is far less than enough. That's why now European Union takes the lead. And they say, our target is to reduce the warming to 1.5 degrees. But this is costly and difficult. This means that by the year 2050, European Union will be carbon neutral. For the time being, it doesn't look like that, but massive funding has been already earmarked. So at European side, I'm quite persuaded that it is serious. But Americans went back home, they had elections, and the new administration said, no, 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 it's not a good deal for America. So we quit. We leave Paris Agreement. And they are a big player. So there is a way to reduce the warming, but it's not an easy way. And I'm not 100% optimistic. So, well, as I said perhaps to you yesterday, I have 4 grandchildren and 2 grandchildren were born last year. They haven't seen a snowflake in Poland, in my place, in Poznań. The whole winter without a single snowflake. No snow, no snow. Warming. And warming going on and on. We have to do something, but it's a truly global effort. If one country wants to save the world, impossible. One continent, impossible. The globe. Because the atmosphere knows no boundaries. We have to reduce emissions here, there, everywhere.
Any additional question? Okay, then thank you very much. Let us have a break.